The third Despicable Me animated feature is titled Minions: Rise of Gru. Anyone who has seen it can attest to the abundance of references, which begs the question, what precisely do these allusions allude to? Where did they first appear? So in today's video, we'll look at some of the allusions in Minions: Rise of Gru. Keep an eye out. To begin with, we have a post-credits scene inspired by the Beatles. Given that Minions is set in 1968, it's hardly surprising that there are several nods to the Beatles throughout the film. You likely missed the Abbey Road connection, where Kevin, Stuart, and Bob appeared at the iconic zebra crossing just as the band crossed it. As the gang comes to know Gru, you've probably heard "Got to Get You Into My Life" playing over the credits. However, if you left before the credits finished rolling, you most likely missed the last one. Following the credits, a section concentrates on the three main characters while they play Revolution, in which most of the auxiliary characters appear. It's a lengthy process, but you receive much more Minion material for your money. Moving on, Gru's mother. In the film's final minutes, Gru, played by Steve Carell, freezes Scarlet and Herb and steals the crown from the Queen. This completes the overkill plot and sets the scene for Despicable Me. The Minions overwhelmingly choose the villain as their new king, and they immediately go on a series of thrilling new adventures. On the other hand, Gru isn't the only Despicable Me character who appears in the concluding sequence, which is played over the end credits. The Minions deface a painting belonging to Marlena Gru in the last act, prompting her son to become involved as well. The lady herself emerges next. Following that, the tangled Mozart hydrant homage. One thing you don't expect to see in a movie about Minions is a frequent mention of a Mozart opera, but that's precisely what you get. The many sequences involving the fire hydrants contain several allusions to the magic flute. Stuart refers to a yellow fire hydrant as Papagena when he first arrives in New York, a reference to a minor character in the play. Furthermore, as Kevin puts out the fuse in the film's conclusion, he whistles the start of Der Vogelfänger bin ich ja, a song from the opera's first act. However, the fact that it may be interpreted as a urination joke detracts from the overall quality of the piece. Moving on, the fake moon landing by Stanley Kubrick. During their journey to visit Kevin, Stuart, and Bob in England, the Minions gang gate crashes what they believe to be a moon set while in America. It's a fun nod to the first Despicable Me, in which the Minions visited the moon, and a clever nod to the conspiracy idea that the 1969 moon landings were staged. But the allusion goes further than that. Whoever is directing the faux landing has a striking resemblance to Stanley Kubrick in his early to mid 1960s incarnation. The inclusion of 2001's director is a lovely homage to the far-fetched theories about his role in the moon landing hoax, and much more overt than the supposed clues in The Shining. Next up, we have the myth of the stone-born sword. The fact that Bob becomes king after removing the blade from the stone is an apparent homage to the Arthurian legend, and the sword pictured here has some resemblance to the version featured in the 1963 Disney film. However, it is not the only intriguing aspect of the blade. In reality, it's the same sword that the Minions' former lord owned. The sequence depicting it is not featured in the film, but it can be seen in the third trailer. During the Middle Ages, they impaled their then master, a king, with a sword that has the same jeweled hilt as the one buried in the stone. The vignette was most likely eliminated so that the similarities in the design of the swords used in the past and those used soon would not be observed, since this would imply that King Arthur was, after all, a villain. Following that, the coffee joke. Much of the film's humor is based on common misconceptions about the English, like the widespread belief that all British people are obsessed with tea. Everyone is having a hot drink, from the common person on the street to the police officers in a high-speed chase. However, a commercial for a modern beverage, coffee, is also shown during the carriage pursuit scene. This satire on the tea concept couldn't be more aptly timed in terms of history. Although many billboards are in the Minions' background, a tiny fraction of them contribute to this ongoing joke. Up next, the Minions' strange language. The Minions' meaningless babbling is one of their main draws. It's understandable, but not quite in the English sense. It isn't brilliant, to put it bluntly. They don't speak a primitive language at all. A lot of what they're saying in those goofy voices makes sense in some languages, so many of them are difficult to know. The miam miam that one ancient Minion uses to describe a banana is not some wacky reinterpretation of the yum yum greeting, but rather the literal French translation of the word. This not only allows for a broader range of language humor, but it also makes sense in the movie's universe, as the Minions have traveled the world in pursuit of their master, and as a result, will have picked up several different dialects along the way. Moving on, at the villain convention, Dr Nefario. Dr Nefario makes a brief cameo during VillainCon. However, Russell Brand does not get a line. He is presumably too busy starting a revolution to obtain one. anyone. Being decades older than Gru, he was most certainly active in the 60s. Thus, it seems that he would show up at the largest gathering of villains on Earth. In this scene, Nefario displays Gru's iconic weapon, the freeze ray, from the Despicable Me movies. No doubt one that went down better than the fart gun. Since Gru presents himself to Lucy after the film with that weapon, it's safe to assume they've met before. A different origin story? Following that, Twisted Comic Con, Villain Con. It's easy to see that Villain Con is a sinister take on the standard expo, with regular people and business people milling about the numerous booths to raise brand exposure. However, one major event has many similarities with San Diego Comic Con. Their logos include large expressive eyes, well, that's more of a coincidence than an Easter egg, and the film's primary attraction, Scarlet Overkill's speech, is set in a room labeled Hall H. The real-world equivalent of these panels would be held in Hall H, where the big film companies, Marvel, DC, and their other non-superhero rivals would show snippets from future movies and do interviews with stars. To a large extent, yes. Moving on, TV guest star appearances. While the Minions are lazing about in New York, they watch television, making some rather peculiar cameo appearances. Short bits from more recent shows like Dragon Tales and The Big Comfy Couch can be seen as the gang changes channels from Woody Woodpecker's Three Little Woodpeckers. Why did we pick these particular clips? For example, Universal, the company behind Minions Illumination, owns Woody Woodpecker, so it was free to use anyway. And both Dragon Tales and The Couch, added no doubt for emotional reasons on the side of the filmmakers, are public service television, so likely had negligible licensing expenses. Next up, a name you can trust, Nixon at last. As the three Minion characters make their way through the streets of New York City for the first time, they come upon a sign for Richard Nixon's presidential campaign that boldly declares, "Finally, a name you can trust." This is undoubtedly a dig at all the backroom deals he's made. It's a wonder the Minions didn't work for him, in a joke for the parents. Although this is a time joke, it rings more accurate than others in the film, such as the US government faking the moon landings a year early, and Stuart imitating Van Halen a decade before their time. In 1968, when Lyndon B. Johnson reversed his decision not to run again and several falsehoods about the start of the Vietnam War were exposed, Tricky Dicky seemed like a reasonable choice. Finally, there is a striking resemblance between the Minions and Gru's daughters. The fact that the Minions are genetically identical makes it challenging to build memorable protagonists. To avoid this problem, the film gives its three significant characters distinctive physical traits. Kevin is tall and lean, Stuart is the normal Minion with only one eye, Bob is short and stocky. The Despicable Me group may seem different from one another, but that's not by accident. Each member's appearance is a dead ringer for one of Gru's adopted daughters, Margot, Edith, or Agnes. Even though Illumination's animation style naturally leads to similarly designed characters, the Tower Guard is reminiscent of Dr Nefario, and several female characters have shades of Scarlet Overkill. The striking visual similarity between the two groups of main characters is too remarkable to be coincidental. Similarly, although all three Minions broadly exhibit the same silliness, their character traits generally resemble those of their human counterparts. What additional Easter eggs can you find in Minions? Share any you see in the comments. Well, that marks the end of our video for today. We hope you liked it. On your way out, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.